about a 9-hour training, and I'm compressing it into about 6.5 hours. Okay, usually I do this training over 2 days. So I'm gonna have to stay tight onto what we're doing. If I go off on a rabbit trail, please feel free to grab me and pull me back, because I am very ADHD. And I've been training in the prisons, and I was on that schedule for the past 2 days, so it will be easy for me to lapse back into that.
Question on the form? The name of the literacy council, you want the one that we belong to? Or
This
what-
council.
This council?
Yeah. Literacy Council
This
of
one
Western
here.
Arkansas.
Okay.
Yes. So let me give you a quick history on my organization. We are a statewide organization. I told you we gather resources and some funding for the smaller councils across the state. We also offer training for our council's volunteers and for their directors, and we're going to be offering training for board members, I hope. We've been around since 1971. In '91, the Arkansas legislature recognized a valuable contribution to the work that all the volunteers in adult literacy in this state are doing, and they set up state funding for us. So that funding comes through us, and then we're able to distribute it to the smaller counties. And it has stayed pretty steady with that format, because the state doesn't have to have 26 applications they deal with. They just deal with one from us. You know, so we are taking a load off the state and able to help all the smaller councils. We also have an Americorps program. I know one of our Americorps members here. I know are you still this year? Former Americorps members, and I'm a former Americorps member. I worked with Twin Lakes Literacy Council and Mountain Home. That's, if you're not familiar with it.
I was born there.
In Mountain Home?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Nice town. Americorps is a service organization, kind of like the Peace Corps, but it operates within the United States and helps our local communities. Americorps members can do everything from helping in a literacy program. So the Arkansas Reads program here in the state, this year we've got 20-something Americorps members sprinkled around the state, and they help adults learning to read. But there are other Americorps members who might go out and work to rebuild state parks. They might work to help the hippie program with little bitty kids. There's a program in Pine Bluff where the youth go out, they have a bicycle corps that goes around the neighborhoods, and they check on seniors in the neighborhood to make sure that they're doing okay. If they need something, a light bulb changed, they keep an eye on them. One of the young members had noticed that one of the people they stop and see, their car was 4 blocks away for a couple of days. When she checked on this lady, found out that her car had been stolen. You know, so little things like this, they're able to help. So the Americorps program covers all sorts of community support, local support within our country. In Arkansas, 14% of adults age 16 and over lack the basic literacy skills that they need to get through the day. Nearly 19% of Arkansans 25 and over don't have a high school diploma or GED. That combination is staggering.
What percent?
19%. I mean, that's almost 1 in 5. Over 130,000 have less than a 9th grade education. Adults with low literacy skills cannot effectively negotiate the healthcare system. Imagine not being able to read a prescription bottle that your doctor has given for you or your child. Imagine not being able to read a simple sign on the wall. If you can't read well enough to get through the day, that makes life very difficult. What you guys are doing, volunteering to help these people, whether you're helping them learn to read the language they speak, or whether you're helping them to learn a new language that's spoken where they live, both of those are very worthy endeavors. The the curriculum that we're going to work with today is called the Laubach Way to Reading. The Laubach Way to Reading is sponsored by an organization called Pro-Literacy. Pro-Literacy is world recognized for literacy in the English language. Dr. Laubach started in the 1930s as a missionary in the Philippines, and he worked with the Maranao people down there, and he realized they had no system of writing. When he realized that, he set about to devise a way to teach them how to read and write. And this program is what has come from that. By 1955, he had a basic handbook set up. It spread like wildfire across the nation, and it actually spread out through the churches. And many ladies and men would go out into their communities and help people in the 50s learn how to read. That was revised and polished over the years, and for over 60 years, this has been a very successful program. For over 60 years, in over 105 countries with people who speak over 300 languages. This program has been used worldwide. Does it work for everybody? No. We don't have anything that works for everybody yet. But 99% of the people, sure. It's gonna capture most people. When I talk about my tutors, I mentioned earlier that I expect my tutors within the prisons to have 2 basic traits. I expect them to have compassion and patience. Patience because there is no timeline when you're working with an adult. Adults have so many barriers to overcome. You don't know how long it will take your student to get through lesson 1 or through level 1 or through any given task that you set them. You need compassion to understand that they are dealing with these barriers, with personal demons that have turned them off of school since an early age. If you can maintain those 2 traits and remind yourself of that, then I think you'll build a phenomenal rapport with your students. Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered, on these people in prison that they're trying to help, do any of them test as MR?
Occasionally. Oh, is MR? I don't think that we have had any yet, because they're usually not going to feed themselves into those programs.
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
But they might be.
They could be. Now, we might have some who are slightly but have never been diagnosed.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the Laubach Way to Reading, let me give you an idea of what all of this entails. I know most of you in this council locally, most of your students are ESL students, or English as a Second Language student. But you will be having, hopefully you'll be able to recruit more people who need to learn how to read, who already speak the language. There are so many resources within the curriculum itself. I invite you all, I've spread all my books out over here by the coffee pot. So when you get a break at some point, I invite you to look at those books, to get a feel for what's offered, what you have to work with. And we will go through all of this stuff throughout the day. You'll get a chance to practice and actually be tutors with each other. I like doing that with my tutoring sessions, because the first time you sit down with a student, you don't want to feel silly while you're doing this. And go ahead and laugh and have fun with it, get a feel for the rhythm, and it'll make it that much more smooth when you sit down with your students. Any thoughts?
Is there anything online that we could read up on the Laubach Way?
If you will go to the New Reader Press website or the Pro-Literacy website, So Pro Literacy is the national literacy organization. And New Readers Press is the publisher that's affiliated with them that publishes this whole curriculum.
Okay.
For those of you who are here, if you go down the hallway, the first room on the right has your curriculum books there. And then there are low-level readers in a library against this wall right here in this section over here. Inside your folders, I've got a whole wealth of information. The first packet on the left-hand side is one on Crazy English. I'm going to read this real quick. A lot of us can take our own language for granted because it is second nature to us now. But English has more exceptions than it has rules. So look along and get a reminder here as I read this. I take it you already know of tough and bow and cough and dough. Others may stumble, but not you, on hiccup, thorough, rough and through. Well done. And now you wish, perhaps, to learn of less familiar traps. Beware of herd, a dreadful word that sounds like beard and looks like bird. Oops, that looks like beard and sounds like bird. And dead, it's said like bed, not bead. For goodness sake, don't call it deed. Watch out for meat and great and threat. They rhyme with sweet and straight and debt. A moth is not a moth and mother, nor both in bother or broth and brother. And here is not a match for there, nor deer and fear for bear and pear. And then there's dose and rose and lose. Just look them up, and goose and choose. And cork and work and cart and ward and font and front and word and sword and do and go and thwart and cart. Come, I've hardly made a start. A dreadful language, man alive, I'd mastered it when I was 5. And yet to write it, the more I tried, I hadn't learned at 55. So the next 2 pages are just for you guys. The next page is similar, the last page, just some fun puns, but it also shows you where confusion reigns in our language. The English language, if you think back quite a few centuries, we spread out across the world. And as we did, whether it was on foot or on horse or in a boat, we encountered all sorts of other cultures and other languages. And when we found words that we didn't have in our language, or we found something that we needed to be able to talk about, we might adopt their word, or well, we would adopt the name for that thing. If we shared an alphabet, we would adopt their spelling. But if we didn't share an alphabet, then whoever is bringing that word back would spell it to the best of their ability. They might be literate, they might not. And let's say there's a 6-month sea voyage between one place and getting back home where somebody could write it down for them. Well, they may have forgotten exactly how it was pronounced, and it gets morphed yet again. So when we talk about spelling rules in English, I like to think of them more as guidelines, because there are so many exceptions. And that makes it difficult for someone who's trying to learn this language. English is considered one of the most difficult languages on the planet to learn, period. And it's because of all the exceptions. The next packet should be, the next staple packet behind that one, should be a Laubach Way to Reading overview. I'm going to go over this really quickly. This program, it's color-coded by level. So level 1, we have green books. Level 2 is red, level 3 is blue, level 4 is yellow. In level 1, you're learning the sounds and the names of the letters. It's really important to learn those sounds. If I know the sounds, I can spell out k-at and then blend it to cat. But if all I know are the names of the letters, then I come up with what? When I try and sound it out with the names, C-A-T.
See,
And how does that help me learn to read? That can be discouraging. So you may have a student who comes in and says, "No, I know my ABCs, look," and they sing the alphabet song for you. Well, that's great, but I want you to know the sounds that these letters make. This is really important. If you don't know the sounds, how can you possibly sound out the words that you're going to look at? So, we're teaching adults, and here in a few minutes we'll talk about the differences in the way that adults learn, because they learn differently than children. But by teaching adults, we're going to take a whole language approach, because our adults who are learning how to read, they speak the language. They speak it every day. As a matter of fact, they may have incredible vocabularies. They may be able to get up and talk all day and talk beautifully, but they can't recognize it when they see it. So you're going to teach them to recognize visually what they hear and what they say. And because we're taking a whole language approach, I'm not going to teach them grammar and putting things together the way we all learned it in school. Instead, they already know instinctively that we put a sentence together, subject, verb, object, right? So by knowing that, I can work with my student, and instead of saying a whole sentence and having them repeat it, I can tell them what the sentence is about and give them a few words, and they can put the sentence together themselves. So this is giving them that respect that they know the language. And believe me, giving them that respect, reminding them that they do know something, kind of levels the playing field, and it helps to boost their self-esteem and helps them to bring those barriers down. So, in level 1, sounds and names of letters, simple punctuation, very simple comprehension, and you will teach them how to blend sounds. In the first 5 lessons of level 1, we introduced 26 sounds, actually 29 sounds, because we've got 26 letters and 3 digraphs. Those are 3 sounds where in the English language we use 2 letters to represent those sounds. Other languages may use 1 letter to represent those sounds. When we move into level 2, we're working with just short vowel sounds. We are working with some consonant blends. The stories get longer, the sentences get longer, a little more complex. We start working on comprehension that's a little bit stronger. Teach your students how to scan through a passage. The print reduces in size. And then we teach them directed silent reading. As we were growing up in grade school, your teacher would stand up in front of class and she'd say, "Okay, I want y'all to read this sentence and tell me who's walking the dog." And it says, "Bob is walking the dog." "Oh, Bob. I know, it's Bob." That's directed silent reading. I am directing my student to find information. Or I might ask a question instead of telling them to find that information. These are things that we've done for so long now, that's second nature to us. But it's a taught skill, it is not innate. When we move into level 3, we're working with all long vowel sounds. We introduce cursive writing. We use a separate notebook or a journal. They will be putting a lot more emphasis on writing their thoughts out. Your student will start learning to go beyond the literal meaning of the words and pull information out beyond just those words. So they'll be able to draw conclusions, they'll be able to infer. When they get to level 4, we're using all those other vowel sounds that can't be classified as long or short, like ooh. And other consonant blends that are a little difficult to deal with. We increase the writing again, and it's almost all comprehension. the reading is very heavy by level 4. By the time you finish level 4, you will have taught your student 260 different skills that they need to be able to read. You probably had no idea that you used 260 skills.
What are all the acronyms, the first dot of each one? What do they mean, TMTR?
It's at the
TM,
bottom.
Teacher's Manual.
Oh, it's at the bottom,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, yes, it is.
Fine.
Thank you. I would have just rattled them off. By the time your student finishes level 4, they should be reading at a 5th or 6th grade level. And it's at that point that we feel a student is able to be successful studying for their GED. That's when they have the reading skills where they can start studying and go forward. Boy, everybody's quiet. Y'all, I run
Thinking.
an
My
informal
phone's
class,
buzzing.
so if you have questions, just speak up, please.
You said with tutoring adults, that there's no real timeline. So it all depends on their comprehension level. There's no actual like, okay, at the end of this time frame, you need to be done with 1 and starting 2.
Correct.
Okay.
We are not on a school year, so we're not working towards a semester or the end of a school year.
Okay.
We don't grade things. I'm not gonna tell my student that they got an A, B, C, or they failed, right? All of that creates so much anxiety for an adult learner, because those are the things that they feared as a kid. Those were the things that deterred them from school. So, what I've always told my students is, I am here for you. We will take however long it takes to learn this.
Well, with ESL, I have to do a lot of repetition,
Sure.
a
With,
lot of repetition.
with the reading, you have to do a lot of repetition.
We do word games, and I have to keep doing the word, all right, we're gonna play the word game again.
Mhm.
And a lot of repetition goes on.
With any language, when you're learning a foreign language, you have to. Otherwise, you file all that stuff back in a dusty closet in the back of your head, and it's not at that quick access.
I work with a girl that, she says she's classified as high MR, you know?
Okay?
But it's strange. She can read a story and she can take, tests or whatever, quizzes over the stuff out of the story. And if it's fill in the blank or something like that, she's got it. I mean, she can do it. But what she can't do is write a sentence. She cannot. She doesn't. I mean, she just won't do it. It says to, okay, put your answer in a sentence or sentences. And she just ignores that. She can't seem to do it. One of the problems is with language, you always have spelling, you know, and that's a shocker. And the other thing is knowing how to form sentences. And
Well, all of that is structured through this program.
yeah,
It is
okay.
woven in through it, all the
She-
way.
I told her, okay, you need to increase your vocabulary, you need to buy a dictionary. And she doesn't own a dictionary.
Okay, get a hold of your local Rotary Council and see if you can get them to donate some student dictionaries.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. They donate them to 4th grade classrooms all around. So we have had them have some left over, and they'll donate them to our Literacy Council.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And that student dictionary uses simpler definitions so that they don't have to chase after other words
Yeah,
in order to
right.
understand the first one. So let me go over a basic structure of the lesson. You're always going to start out with a reading section, where you teach a chart and a story, and we will start this here in a little while. Then you move into review. where you check homework. You do a little checkup. So we don't use the word test, we don't use the word exam or pop quiz or quiz. Even assessment can put somebody on edge. I tell my students, when I get to this point, I need to check up and make sure that I taught you what I should have last lesson. You know, let me ask you a few questions. Let's do a couple of things real quick and see if I need to go back and teach something else that I forgot. I take that responsibility on my shoulders. I don't mind a bit. And then a listen and write, which is basically just a little bit of dictation. So that helps them hear the sounds and then be able to translate that into something visual. Then there's a writing section and new homework. This is the basic framework that we're going to be working with today. If you look at the second page in that packet, this has that structure written out. And so we will refer back to this as we go through, so you might want to keep that one handy. In the back of the left-hand side, you have a single sheet of paper that has EOT at the top. Y'all, I know I'm throwing a lot of information at y'all, and we're going at a fast pace. Holler if you need me to stop and clarify, okay? I want to give you a little feeling for Dr. Laubach's thoughts on his principles for teaching. He uses the word compassion as a mnemonic. The most important one on here is the first one, C. Cut no out of your vocabulary. I don't think that there is any more important directive than that. And what I mean by that is learn how to correct your student from a positive stance rather than a negative. Your student has spent much of their life hearing, no, wrong, try again, try harder, you're not trying, come on, try harder. What's wrong with you? Are you dumb? So let's cut no out of the vocabulary. What I mean by that, if I'm working with my student and say we're playing I Spy, and I say, I spy something in the room that begins with the sound D. What is it? Desk. Desk starts with the sound D. Good job, but that's not the word I'm looking for.
Are you looking for different?
Different starts with the same sound. That's good, but that's not the word I'm looking for.
Diverse?
Well, we're using objects in the room.
Objects,
Okay, well, you can't give
Dry erase board?
Dry. That does start with D. All right, so I'm thinking divider. But what I've done, I have told my student that they're getting the skill right. But now it's just a guessing game. So to keep practicing this skill, that's a positive way to correct my student. And I didn't use the word no. So it takes a little practice to get used to working with someone like that, being able to correct somebody from a positive stance, but it brings you light years ahead of where you would be if you kept saying no or wrong. Oh, observe what the new reader already knows and respect and build on this knowledge. So if your student says, I know my ABCs, okay, great. I tell you what, I've got a way that we can move through this a little quicker. Why don't we try this alternative method? And if we can keep up with it, then, you know, we'll be through the first 5 lessons that much faster. And we'll go through that later today, and you'll learn how this alternative method works. But what I've done is respected my student's knowledge, or what he thinks he already knows, and we will try this to move him along so that he doesn't have to feel like he's starting at square one, because that's tough. You know, it's hard enough to swallow your pride and come in the door and say, I need help. So if they can get a little pride back and say, but I already know this, and show you that, then that makes them feel a little better. Make certain you respect the time, begin and end promptly. That's important. You don't want to waste their time, you don't want them wasting your time. So start from the beginning, the first class that you have with your student, and this is class time. You know, it may be you have a chatty student, so maybe you build into your hour or 2 hours, however you set it up, you know, 5 minutes at the end where you guys can let off some steam. But class time is sacred because we don't have a lot of it. Prepare your lessons carefully. Confidence begets confidence. I'm sure you all will. Everybody is conscientious about wanting to do a good job. But things happen, and if my child is up all night with a fever and I've got an 8 o'clock class in the morning and I don't have time to sit down and look over the entire lesson, you know, those things are going to happen. I will point out 2 sections that I think are absolutely critical and should take 2 minutes to review before sitting down with your student. But ideally, if you know you're teaching lesson 2 sometime next week, please find a few minutes just to scan through it, if not to sit down and read it in depth, whatever your preferred method is. But you don't want to be sitting there with your student and say, oh, I didn't know I was going to teach this today. Wait a minute, I need to read through this. Because then your student's going to say, they don't know this? How can they teach me if they don't know it? So just by looking through it, you won't get any surprises. Allow your student to progress at his own pace and to teach himself as much as possible. What happens when you spoon feed somebody? If you spoon feed a child all the time, what happens?
They don't learn how to feed themselves.
That's right.
They expect it.
Yeah,
They might even become dependent upon it.
right. And you will not be there forever by their side to help them read. So, anytime your student can teach himself, anytime that opportunity comes up, let them go through the pain and agony of teaching themselves, because they inevitably will learn that skill much more strongly than they would having somebody just say, this is how you do it, right? See that your student gets honest praise and encouragement because they've not had enough throughout their lives. Save unnecessary chatter until after the lesson. This goes with what I was saying about the time management. I'm very ADHD. I get off on rabbit tracks. So if I'm a student and we're looking at something and all of a sudden we're talking about baseball. Oh, would you catch a game last night? Well, hopefully my tutor will say, yeah, I did, but right now we're in class. I tell you what, let me write that down. At the end of class, we'll talk about it later. And 5 minutes later, we come up along something else and it's talking about fish. Oh, you should have seen the fish I caught this weekend. Really? Where were you fishing? Oh, I was out on the lake. And on and on. Well, I tell you what, we'll talk about that at the end of the class. And you can have a little parking lot where you write a whole bunch of things down. And you may have a long list the first time, and gradually that list will get shorter each time you work with your student because they will learn to respect your teaching time. Introduce something new in every lesson. That is set up for you. That's part of the program. Every lesson starts out with a chart and a story. starts out with something new. So you don't have to build that in. And when I say every lesson, that means every chapter in your books. I don't mean every time you sit down with your student, because you may take 5 class times to go through a lesson. But I do mean every lesson you have something new that they will learn. Offer friendship and understanding, but avoid patronizing. None of us like it when someone is patronizing with us. It feels demeaning. We don't want them to be condescending. Notice and encourage ways in which your student can teach you. That one is also very important. If you can learn something from your student and acknowledge that, even something very little, that gives you an opportunity to remind your student that, hey, I don't have those skills. You've just taught me something. And you know what? You don't have these skills that I have, and I'm going to teach you, so we're sharing. So that already boosts their self-esteem again. And it reminds them that these are skills to be learned, and it's just a set of skills that they haven't learned yet, and they're going to learn them. Self-confidence is a big thing, a big barrier that we deal with our adult students learning to read. Okay. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Everybody get up and stretch for a moment. Okay. I want to hear why you've chosen to do this.
I'm doing it in memory of my daughter, the one I was telling you about that read on different colors.
Okay.
She passed away from when she was 11 and was finally reading 3rd grade level, fixing to go into 5th grade.
Mhm.
So that's what it's in for me.
Okay. Who else? Why'd you decide to volunteer to teach people to read?
To encourage us to read. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to help out the community and help them to get jobs and stuff like that, to be able to and stuff like that.
Great. Somebody else?
I get a lot of self-satisfaction, you know, being able to help someone.
How about some of you quiet people back here? Yeah, I know you. Why don't you tell us why?
Well, as an Americorps member, I have to say that, these positions give me an opportunity to help with the community. And it's just not like a little impact where I help people to read. It's a big impact where I help each of these persons who know how to read. And maybe, by learning how to read, they might be a success person later on. It's a big way to help with the community.
What's your name?
Lynn.
Lynn? Hi, Lynn.
I started volunteering when I was in 7th grade in the special education room because my older sister did, and so it's just basically been a way of life for me. So
Great. So are you a current member here? Have you been
yes,
tutoring for a while?
I teach an ESL
Okay.
class,
Okay.
and previously I've done adult literacy.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if you have anything to contribute, please help out. I don't have all the answers, y'all. I'm just giving y'all a basis to start from. Who else?
I used to volunteer doing taxes for people, and I did taxes for our director, and he asked me if I would like to volunteer, and I found this is a lot more fulfilling, teaching people rather than doing taxes.
Right, because a lot of times it's not good news you're giving them, is it? You're not making them happy.
Me?
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't even know this was going on. I found out because of Josh, and he literally drugged me along. So.
Great. Okay. Well, hopefully you will find a passion for this.
Well, I work in the education system, and just know that if you can't read, you can't be successful in life at all.
Where do you work in the education system?
Well, I have a degree in music, K through 12, but because I was later in life when I got my education, I haven't really secured a permanent job.
Okay.
So I sub. I've subbed
Mhm.
every grade, every subject in about the last 5 years.
Okay.
So
Amen.
I just see such a need, for people to just know the joy of reading, and also to be successful in life, especially people who come from other countries and can't speak the language. I just have a real compassion for people. I want them to know things. and
Well,
learn.
hopefully, after today, you may pick up some strategies that'll help you when you're working, maybe with teenagers.
I'm gonna tell you the real reason I'm here.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Uh-oh.
What is your name?
Rhonda Gray.
Rhonda, okay.
Few of us are on the Literacy Council Board
Mm-hmm.
here, and Heather threatened to kill us and our families.
Wait a minute, which Heather? We gotta clarify. Good. Is it you or you?
The director.
Uh-oh.
And anyway, I just want to say that from a reading aspect, you have already given me so much to think about already. I've not been a tutor. I've been an English teacher
Okay.
for about 44 years. But reading is, thank you, reading is such a difficult yet easy thing to do. And it is difficult in one sense and very easy in another. But the information that we're getting here today, and like I said, I'm already impressed. It just makes me think of so many things that I can do to help people and to help them to empower them. And I think that's what it's all about. We have to give our community confidence. And with the scare that's going on right now with a lot of our Hispanic members of the community, I think if they could come and get more knowledge and more understanding about how to survive, and reading is such a big part of that, and learning how to write so you can communicate effectively, then I think it's so well worth it. And this Literacy Council is so needed here in this community.
It is. It is. I told y'all that in Arkansas, 14% of our adults cannot read above a 5th grade level. And part of that includes people who don't have English as their first language. But we have some communities, mostly down in the Delta and then up in the Northeast quadrant as well, that are as much as 25% of people who don't read.
Wow.
It's tremendous. I want to thank you, board members who are here today. Not all board members would do this. And I think it speaks to your dedication and your passion for what you're doing. And I hope that this will enrich what you're doing for this community. It gives you an idea of what all your volunteers do, what they go through, and all the students who come through. It also gives you an idea of why they're here and the struggles that they go through. I wish every board from all the councils in the state would take the time to go through a training like this and get a little bit better idea of what they're getting themselves into.
Of course, here in Fort Smith, we're unique.
Of course you are.
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
Did you pick today for the training for a specific reason?
It was open.
Okay. Well, I thought it was really fascinating that we're all here for this specific reason. I'm hearing all these reasons because today's National Pay It Forward Day.
Is it?
Yes.
I did not know that.
I just saw it on Facebook when we were on break.
Okay. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about reading instruction and how we understand reading instruction. So current research says that we've got 4 components to reading instruction. The first one is alphabetics. Alphabetics is phonemic awareness and a variety of decoding skills. When I say phonemic awareness, basically what I mean is the understanding of sounds. You don't have a sheet on this, sorry y'all. Understanding sounds and the symbols that we use to represent them, or the letters that we use to represent them. Decoding skills, we use so many of them. A good example would be word families, rhyming words, so cat, hat, mat, sat, pat, rat. If you have a student and they understand that AT makes the sound at, and they learn that really strongly, and then they realize that they can make 20 other words by just adding a different sound in front of it, that is a phenomenal aha moment. So if you've got someone who's a poet or a rapper, when they see that, it's beauty. They say, really? And then they just start spouting off all sorts of words. That's fun. So we use decoding skills as well as blending sounds together. Fluency is an important part. Reading with speed and inflection. Do y'all remember back in grade school, the teacher would say, okay, Bobby, I want you to read the first sentence for me. And you hear a big sigh of relief, because it wasn't me. Because none of us wants to sound like that robot. None of us wants to hear the boy threw the ball. Instead, we would all be engaged if we heard the boy threw the ball, right? So ideally, you want to teach your students how to hear their reading the same way a storyteller tells a story. You want the emotion and the color to come out when they read. So if you can teach them from the beginning to read the way they tell a story to their friends, then they will enjoy it that much more. And that gives them fluency. Vocabulary, you've got to have vocabulary, and that's just word meanings. But then we have reading comprehension skills and strategies. There are a whole bunch of those woven in throughout the 4 levels of this program. If you're reading along and you come to a word you don't know, what do y'all do?
Either skip it or
Count it out.
Okay, you look it up, you
Right.
try and sound it out. I may say, if I'm at my mom's house, hey Mom, what does this word mean? Right? If I have a dictionary handy, I'll try and puzzle it out there. But what else could I do? If I'm all by myself and I'm sitting at the doctor's office reading,
I try to sound them out.
okay?
Look at the words around it.
Context clues.
Context
So
clues.
I fill in the blank. I read the whole sentence and I fill in the blank. Well, that's not intuitive as much as it is taught. So our teachers all taught us to do that. Many students, when they get to something they don't know, they stop. They can't go any further. So we've got to teach them to read this, hold this part in their head, and continue to read this and say, what fits their best? Okay, well, reading, understanding, skills, and strategies. Understanding, it doesn't start with that sound. Maybe I want to find a word that has the same meaning that starts with a k sound. And so then you have them go through words that they know that mean the same or something close. So these are skills that we teach. Another important aspect of this whole program is, well, this whole program is very structured. As we go through it, you will see it's almost written out the same way a play script is written out. It will tell you what to say, it will tell you what to do. And we use a controlled vocabulary. So all this structure is designed to give your student a sense of well-being, a sense of comfort. They feel that safety net. The lessons are all, they're structured the same with there will be a few changes here and there as we progress and get better. But if you're sitting in class and you know what the teacher is expecting, then you can focus on the content. If I'm sitting in class and I know the teacher is working on multiplication right now, and that when she gives me some numbers she wants me to multiply and not to add or not to divide, then I have a certain comfort level. But if I have no idea what she's gonna throw at me, there's a lot of anxiety. So the structure is put into the system to take some of that anxiety away from your student. They learn the patterns, they learn the routines, and we're good to go. Well, the other part of the safety net is having a controlled vocabulary. In level 1, there's 132 words that your student will learn. That's not a whole lot. Now, for most of the students, they're words that they already know, but they will learn how to read them. They will now know them visually instead of knowing them just for speaking and hearing. In level 2, it's another 262 words that are added to that. In level 3, another 543, and then 881 are added in level 4. So by the time they finish the 4th level, they have a reading vocabulary. So these are just words that they've memorized of about 2,000 words. That really boosts their fluency because they can just see the word and know it as they go along. They don't have to sound everything out. But you've also given them skills on how to figure out those other words that they don't know by sight.
Ma'am,
Yes.
is Lava mainly geared toward people who don't speak English?
No.
No?
There's a Laubach way to reading and the Laubach way to English. So today I'm teaching the Laubach way to reading. Now, they work with a lot of similar principles, but there are differences.
Okay, so this is their English.
Yes. Today we're focusing on basic literacy.
Okay.
So I want now to talk about how adults learn. Because adults learn differently than children do. As a child, well actually as an infant, how do I learn language?
You hear it?
I hear mom, right. So my belly hurts, I'm hungry, and I start wailing. Well, then mom comes over and she says, "Are you hungry, honey? Do you want a bottle? Do you want a bottle?" And I hear the word bottle enough, I start trying to mimic mom. And instead of wailing, I might say bottle. And then I get that positive reinforcement. I get the bottle when I say that word or when I say those sounds. So that has meaning to me. And that's how we pick up language as an infant. We mimic what those around us are saying. And we get that reward when we get the sounds right. When we get a little older, children go to school. And in school, we come in, we sit at our desk, we do what the teacher tells us to do. We learn what the teacher tells us to learn. That's our job, right? But as adults, when we learn something, it's different. We approach learning differently. So what I want everybody to do, I want you to think about the last time you learned how to do something as an adult, not as a child. I don't care if you learned how to knit, you learned a new recipe, you learned how to take apart a motorcycle and put it back together, learned a new language, something that you have learned as an adult, some new skill. Then I want you to think about every single thing that impacted that learning experience. So, were you in a big class like this? Were you sitting one-on-one with your teacher? Were you teaching yourself? Did you learn from a video? Did you learn from a book? What was the day like? Was it a hot day? Was it a cold day? What was your room like where you're working? Was it really noisy? What was going on in your life when you were learning that? Did you have outside influences that impacted how you were learning? Write down a couple of good things and a couple of bad things about your learning experience. couple of people to share?
I feel like I talk all the time. You get sick of listening to me.
You sat on the front row at school, didn't you?
I don't know where
I was in the back.
So what did you learn as an adult?
Well, it's a long story, but anyway, I watch a channel on TV called Create, which is, it teaches skills with gardening and cooking
Okay.
and all this jazz. And so I'm trying to learn cooking skills that I had not learned before, which is a lot. You know, I mean, you fall into a rut and you cook what you know, right? All right, I'm trying not to do that. And so anyway, with baking, it's different from other kinds of cooking because you have to be exact in measurements and things like this. And you have to have the proper tools.
Right.
Because if you don't have the proper tools, it's not going to turn out right. Okay, that's the good stuff. If you can afford to get the proper tools, that's also a problem. Anyway, the big downfall with that is there's no one to ask. You know, I mean, you see this on television. If you ever watch the French person who cooks, he's just beyond.
Emile?
Well, no,
Is that his name?
his name is Jacques Pepin. And he can take an onion like that, you know, and it's done. I can't slice an onion like that. But anyway, he makes it look so easy. But then he's been a chef for 60 years.
Right, he's been doing videos for over 30.
Yeah, right. And he worked with Julia Child, which
Right.
tells you something.
Right.
I mean, she's been gone a while now. So anyway, it's interesting and it's really fascinating. And even if you don't like food, it's still fun.
Okay.
I don't know anyone who doesn't like food though.
Somebody else share with me, please.
I'd always wanted to learn how to tie a tie, and so I think a couple of Saturdays ago, I found a video on how to tie a Windsor knot. And the advantages, the pros were that I could rewind the video as much as I wanted. And the second one was there was auditory and visual instruction, so, because I'm a kind of an auditory learner.
Okay.
So, and then the cons were I'm not very coordinated. And I had a lot going that day, so I had to learn quickly. I was in a rush. But I was successful. I did learn how.
Great. Somebody else, yes ma'am.
My husband and I take ballroom dance lessons.
Oh.
So we are trying to master West Coast swing, which is the most difficult dance to learn. And so we are in a group setting.
Okay.
So there's an instructor and his wife who demonstrate everything so we can see.
Right.
And then we are given ample opportunity to practice. And I have found that if it's a step I'm interested in learning and I want to learn it, I can and will. He tried to teach us something last Monday that I thought was absolutely stupid. I could tell by the look on my husband's face, he agreed with me, and that we were never going to do it ourselves on the dance floor. So if I don't want to, I'm not going to. And I tried to do it this morning by myself, to just go through my part of it.
Mhm.
I don't remember it, because I didn't wanna learn it in the first place, so I just kinda faked it in class, so I would be a good sport. But that move, I don't care.
Okay, one more. Mhm.
Learning to manage finances and cooking
Okay,
as an adult, because I actually live on the autism spectrum,
okay.
and the positives are building routine and building structure.
Mhm.
And I struggle with a little bit of budgeting and meal planning a little bit, so that's why I have to. I'm not saying it out loud.
So what has actually made it, what has made that difficult to learn this?
Just with the proper supports in place and stuff like that.
So, organization?
Organization, yes.
Okay.
Organization.
Okay, so we've got good aspects and bad aspects. If you look at that list, can y'all come up with a general principle based on some of those things there? On how adults learn?
Observation.
They learn by observation,
They actually have to want to learn.
Self-motivation.
Yeah.
interest,
Interest.
self-motivation.
Mhm.
Okay, you have a packet in here called Principles of Adult Learning. The very first one in this packet says adults learn best what is relevant to their lives. And that's true. As adults, we're not like kids who go in and we just absorb what is put in front of us, for the most part. As adults, we have about 50 marbles pinging around inside our skulls demanding attention. Oh God, tomorrow the rent is due, or my mortgage is due, and my daughter was up with a fever all night last night. Oh, how is she feeling this morning? Oh, did I remember to pack my lunch? Oh my goodness, I've got a presentation next week. I've got too much to do for that. And all of these things are trying to get my attention, my number one attention, while I'm trying to learn something. So to me, whatever I'm learning had better be very relevant to my life. Either I really want to learn this, or it is something that I need for survival. So a lot of our ESL students, they're here because they need to learn the language to survive in this environment, in this community. If I have a young woman who comes to me and she says, I want to learn to speak English, and I say, great. You know, why do you want to do this? And she says, well, my children keep bringing notes home from school and I need to go talk to the teacher because I can't read the notes, but I don't understand enough to be able to talk to her. And I said, I can help you with that. And so we sit and kind of finish out the interview. I find out that she and her husband have been here for a few months. She's got 3 kids, all in grade school. When the kids go to school, she goes and helps her husband at his restaurant. You know, she works through the lunch hour. So I said, okay, we'll meet next week and we'll get started. I'll help you with your English. So I'm so excited. Wow, here's a new member to our community. I'm gonna help her engage with the community more and be able to communicate with people in the area. And so I set out this plan. Well, I set this in Mountain Home. So in Mountain Home, that's kind of a resort area. And I think, wow, with her husband having a restaurant, if I teach her about sports and I teach her about recreation and I give her all this vocabulary, she'll be able to communicate with customers really well. That will boost their business because people will not be shy about going into this restaurant where people might or might not speak their language. And so I start my classes with her with all of this language about sports. I teach her, you know, because the local football games happen and everybody goes out to eat afterwards, or basketball games, and Everybody goes up there for big bass tournaments, and people come from all over the world to fish on the rivers. Well, we go through a few classes, and then she doesn't show up for a class, and she doesn't show up for another. And I go talk to my boss, and I don't understand. Can you call and, would you call and find out, you know, is she okay? You know, I think maybe she's been home with sick children. But I come to find out that I'm not addressing her needs. She wanted to learn language well enough to talk to her children's teacher. She didn't care about all of this other language I'm teaching her at this moment. Yes, that will help her at work. That'll help her get better tips and help her family have customers who want to come back to their place. But it's not helping her to engage with her children's teachers. So it's not relevant to her life at the moment. It's not fulfilling her need. And adults have to have those needs met when we go to learn something. We've got another, where'd it go? Practice. So by being able to practice something over and over, by being able to apply what you've learned, you're going to learn that all that much better. Grandma always said, practice makes perfect. And it's true. If you give me a book and say, okay, this is how you tear apart your bike, I want you to go take it apart, clean it, and put it back together. Really? I may read through it. I may not get an opportunity for a few weeks to go beyond that. But then I gotta start all over again. That's very off-putting. But if you sit down and show me and let me get my hands into it and let me practice it, I am more apt to remember it. Same thing with the language we were talking earlier. If I am learning a language and you give me 20 words of vocabulary today, great. I need to practice that so that I keep it up here where I can retrieve it. But if you give me 20 today and 20 tomorrow and 20 the next day and the next day, and we don't get an opportunity to use those words, then it's all going to go back into some dusty closet and I won't be able to access them. I've got to be able to practice whatever it is I'm learning. Adults need and expect to be treated with respect. That's a big one. If I feel like my tutor is patronizing, I don't want to sit through that. You know, I don't need to waste my time with somebody being condescending towards me, or for me to even feel that they're being condescending, whether they intend to or not. But if I have a teacher who is going to respect me, respect the things that I know, remember that I'm adult, and help me feel that I still have worth, oh yeah, I'll sit there all day. That's not just a teacher, that's a mentor. That's somebody who's gonna help me get beyond the barriers I have to learning. Adults have a wealth of skills and experiences that can serve as learning resources. We all have highs and lows, and our students have highs and lows too. And there will be times when your student hits a rough spot and they get discouraged and they want to quit. But if you know motivations for your student, if you know skills that they have and experiences they have, you can draw on that and kind of put that carrot out in front of them and keep them engaged. So if I know that the student I work with loves antique motorcycles and he rebuilds them, well, he gets all these magazines all the time and he can't read them. But he still gets the magazines because he likes looking at the pictures, and sometimes they may have step-by-step instructions and he can follow the pictures, he just can't read what's below it. Well, I might decide to start teaching him vocabulary that he's going to encounter in that magazine that's specific to rebuilding antique motorcycles. And I may have him do a few words a week where he memorizes those words as sight words. Then that will enrich his experience by when he reads through those magazines, because he'll start to pick those words out when he sees them. And before you know it, he's able to read the caption under these pictures. He's able to read the smaller blurbs and maybe with a little help even get through articles. But it's something that falls within his realm of interests. So he's going to be more inclined to stick with it. Because honestly, the curriculum, it's not exciting. The stories, they're not exciting. But you find ways as a tutor to keep your student engaged, and that's one method. So by exploiting their interests and their skills, even if I know my student was, he was a cook in the military, so there's a whole realm of vocabulary that he knows, and I can teach him those words. And maybe that's not really his interest so much now, but it's something that I can tap into that he has a comfort level with. And it will help him to feel more successful. Then he can pick up a recipe and run with it. And then adults may have to overcome a number of barriers to learning. So we've talked about some, these psychological barriers from hearing, wrong, no, come on, try harder. You're not trying. Come on, just try harder. Why won't you try? What's wrong with you? Are you stupid? So many of our adults have heard that throughout their school careers. And a lot of them, that's why they drop out of school. They're not getting any respect. All they get is negative feedback. And so that's how they view school. So if we can make school a different experience for them, then they're apt to set that aside or break down those barriers and move forward. Other barriers they may have. If your student wears glasses, then it's not going to help them to sit with the book if they don't have their glasses with them. Now, I'm pretty sure all the councils have reading glasses on hand for emergencies. Yeah. So if your student shows up, oh, I forgot my glasses, don't worry. I've got extra pairs in the office. And grab a pair. Don't let that stop y'all from what you're doing. If your student wears hearing aids, please ask them to wear them, especially in the very beginning of reading instruction, because you're teaching those sounds. And it's important that they learn to hear these sounds, and they need to hear them also coming out of their mouth so that down the road they can hear it coming out of their mouth when you're not around to correct them. And something I never thought about until I encountered it when I was in the prison, if your student wears false teeth and they forget them, that's going to hinder in the beginning how they hear what it is that they're trying to say, how they hear the sounds. My 90-year-old German student, she has one false tooth, and she would forget that occasionally. And we had fun with it because she would just laugh at how she was speaking. But it made a difference in how she said what she said, and it made her very self-conscious during class. And that right there is a barrier. So, adults learn differently than students. The next page, if you'll turn the page, should be characteristics of adults as learners. Let's take 2 or 3 minutes, please. Read through those, and I want to hear which one speaks to you. resonates with you?
Well, the one that caught my attention right away was the, where'd it go? Sorry.
That's okay.
It was the one, oh, yeah. Adults have needs which are more concrete and immediate than those of children. When I first started at the Crawford County Volunteers for Literacy, what they usually do is have you shadow one of their tutors. So my first experience was shadowing our math teacher. And the student, they were working on fractions, which are always, people hate fractions. And he was having a really, really difficult time understanding how to multiply fractions. It's different than adding, it's less intuitive, you know. So our math teacher, being a good teacher, and this is usually what you try to do with math, is try to get the student to understand the theory of it, because then they can relate that to other mathematical operations. So they were going over and over, and he was taking different tacks on, okay, let's look at it this way. And finally, at the end, he said, well, you know, the quick way of doing it is just do it by this routine. And the student just says, well, why didn't you say that in the first place? That's easy, I can do that. So yeah, there's a lot, I find a lot of that in reading as well as math instruction, that sometimes just cut to the chase, show me how to do it, and I can take it from there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just like the young lady I worked with, her concrete need, that immediate need for her was to talk to the teachers, not to talk to customers, so, yes, sir.
Number 9, adults are sometimes fatigued when they attend classes.
Yes.
When I started here, I think just last month, I expected adults, I teach ESL, or tutor, I expected adults to be very serious and just come just to learn. They wanted, but the tutors and the students have shown me that they want to have fun. They want to get out of their seats. They want to laugh. It's more comfortable that way.
It is. You may have somebody who works in a factory and they work a swing shift and they come in for, maybe you've got your class set at 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, if they get off work at 7 in the morning, there's quite a few hours there before they come to class, but most of our adults are so dedicated. They will come into class and they will be sucking down coffee so they can stay in class, but they're going to be exhausted. You know, remember, we all have our responsibilities, and we can be very exhausted.
2 of them actually stood out to me, and I think they actually go hand in hand really well, is 4 and 8. Adults do not comprise a captive audience, and they come with a mixed set of motives.
That's right.
Like students, they're there because society says you're forced to go there, like young students. But adults, it's like, okay, I'm doing this because I need it for multiple different reasons, but I'm also here on my time. Don't waste my time. Make sure I'm
That's
here
right.
because I want to be here and I need to know what I need to know.
That's right. And if you are not meeting their needs, they're out of here. Okay. So the next few pages, I'm not going to go over. These general tutoring principles, those are references for you. For you guys to read at a later time. But the next to the last page is a learning style inventory. We're going to talk about learning styles here in a minute, but first I want you guys to go through and fill this out as if you were making these statements. So, number 1, I can remember more about a subject through listening than reading. Well, that happens often, that happens sometimes, or that happens seldom. which I want you to figure out what your learning style is. We're gonna do this in a few different steps, so please fill this out. It's the second to last page in that.
24.
There you go. Oh, it is, number 17. This is that, yes, it is, learn by finger spelling the words. I took this from a Canadian website, it's that darn Canadian translation.
What's finger spelling?
C-A-T.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like writing in the air, and I'm like.
Well, it could be, yeah.
What did she say, 17 was?
Finger.
Finger?
Finger.
Oh, finger.
You do it on the phone?
Okay.
Y'all, this is not anything that will be graded, this is just something to enlighten you, and it may help you with your student. let's set this aside for just a second, turn the page, and let's talk about learning styles. It's accepted that there are three basic styles of learning. That we learn in through three basic methods of input. Auditory, so through hearing, visual, through what we see, and then kinesthetic, through what we feel and do. An auditory learner enjoys oral discussion. So, us sitting here and talking, you guys, if you're an auditory learner, you'll remember a lot of what we said. That may be somebody who you saw in study hall who's reading and they're kind of talking out loud while they're reading. They're not reading silently. Maybe even whispering, so they don't get in trouble. They require oral explanations. So if I came up to y'all and said, hey, Grandma said that we can have a party at the barn Friday night. I've got maps for everybody. If you're an auditory learner, you can say, no, just tell me how to get there, I'll remember. No, here, take this map. No, really, tell me. Okay, well, you're gonna go down Highway 53 about 5 miles, and you'll see these two trees that kind of grow away from each other and bend away. You're gonna turn right there and go another 2 miles. After about 2 miles, you'll see this bright yellow house with blue trim. Well, that's Grandma's house, so turn down her driveway, but don't stop at her house. Don't bug her. Go on all the way back to the tree line, and that's where the barn is. And 7 o'clock, we'll see you there Friday night, right? Yeah. So they'll remember that. That auditory input is what they needed. They have trouble with written direction, so the map does them no good. Or even just handwritten out instructions on how to get there, it does them no good. They reinforce a task by talking through it. So have you ever seen somebody who, maybe they're working on their bike? Okay, so next I have to undo this bolt, and if I undo this bolt, I can take the crank off. And have you ever seen somebody who does that when they're working? They kind of talk themselves through each step?
I know.
Yeah. Chances are they may be an auditory learner. But a visual learner,
Can't read that.
you
Can't read visual learner.
I know, that's why I read it up here.
Okay.
So a visual learner is someone who remembers visual detail. They will follow along when somebody else is reading. So sitting in class when we're all reading Shakespeare, and one person's going and then another person, you may see somebody who's following along like this as one person is reading, whereas the auditory learner is just sitting back and soaking it up, right? They prefer to see what's to be learned. It makes it hard. It would be hard for them to listen to maybe a TED Talk instead of watching a TED Talk. It'd be hard to just listen to a lecture if there's nothing to connect it to visually. They need written instructions. So my visual learners, when I hand them a map or hand them written instructions to Grandma's house, that's perfect for them. But when I spoke those directions, that went in one ear and out the other. They have trouble following lectures. My first chemistry class in college was a freshman weeder class with 500 people in it. And I can remember showing up late, ended up in the nosebleed section. And this is way back when it was high tech for a teacher to use overhead transparencies. So he didn't use very many of those. And had he not followed the book, I would have been lost. I had to have that book there to follow through and be able to write down stuff as much as see it in front of me. I barely caught what it was he was saying. I just used that to augment what I was reading. Then we have the kinesthetic learner. And a kinesthetic learner, that's the person who likes to get their hands dirty. They want to get in the middle of something and try it out. They need to physically be active while they're learning. They have to do it to know it. When you see somebody in the library who's studying vocabulary words and they're writing that word 20, 25 times, they're probably a kinesthetic learner because they're making extra connections. Every time they write it, that's another connection in their brain with that word. But if they just hear it or read it, it may stay there, but it's probably more ephemeral than anything. They prefer activity-based learning. So why am I telling y'all all of this?
So that we can possibly notice which way the
Yeah.
person learns better.
Right.
But what if you're like me? Sometimes I learn all three ways.
Sure.
With
Sure.
different, whatever it
It's,
is.
it's
so.
not often that somebody is only one way.
Right.
That's rare. You know, you may have one that you're dominant with, you know, and then others that are not so dominant. Or maybe two of them are fairly equal and one of them doesn't fall into play very often at all. One of them you're very weak with. But if you can recognize a little bit with your student, then you can present other opportunities that better support their learning style. So if I have a kinesthetic learner that I'm working with, then I'm going to find activities that engage them physically. Maybe I'll take Scrabble tiles and put them across my desk. And when I ask him to sound out and spell a word, I'm going to have him physically touch that and bring that tile down and say the sound at the same time. Because just that little bit of physical engaging makes a big difference in how he's learning. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure somebody somewhere has sort of sorted out the percentages of the population, general population, as far as what kind of general learners there are.
Mhm.
Because we're dealing with people who are adults
Mhm.
and non or poor readers, are we less likely to have visual learners?
I don't think so.
And if a person is more likely to be a visual learner and and are basically dyslexic, does that complicate that particular problem or their ability to learn, to read?
I don't think so. I'm not sure that it would. I think that when you are instructing a student, if you find ways to be all-inclusive, to include all three learning styles, then you're gonna have a much better response from your student in how they learn.
I'll certainly have.
Okay. So let's go back to that inventory real quick. I'm gonna go down the inventory and tell you which are auditory, which are visual, and which are kinesthetic. And then I'm gonna have y'all tally them up so that you can kind of figure out where you fall. Okay, number 1 is auditory. Numbers 2 and 3 are both visual. Number 4 is kinesthetic. Number 5 is auditory. Number 6, kinesthetic. If it helps, just use an A, V, and K as we go down this list. Number 7 is visual. Number 8 is auditory. Number 9 is kinesthetic. 10, visual. 11, auditory. 12, kinesthetic. 13, auditory. 14, visual. 15, kinesthetic. 16, visual. 17, kinesthetic. 18, auditory. 19, visual. 20, kinesthetic. 21 is auditory. 22 is visual, 23 is kinesthetic, 24 is auditory. What's number 4? Number 4 was kinesthetic. Okay, so what I would like y'all to do, go down that list, and with the auditory, so y'all can watch as I do mine. My first one on the auditory, I have a sometimes. Number 2 is visual. I have a sometimes. Number 3 is also visual, and I have an often. So I'm gonna fill in all my tick marks. Am I confusing anyone?
How are you,
Okay, so the first, number 1 on here is auditory. And I chose,
so you're making another chart
yes,
to tally?
yes. So audio, visual, kinesthetic, and often, sometimes, and seldom.
Okay.
Right, okay with how I set this up?
I don't know, mine.
Yeah, you're doing fine. Mhm.
Okay, no, just set up a different chart. You got that, okay. So for like, one auditory, so, 1 tick there, one visual off, another visual off.
Yeah, we're just-
Kinesthetic, so,
So we're just translating all of this into one master chart. So this is, whoops, this is audio. And then seldom and sometimes. So then, for those of you who are already done, we're gonna assign a point value to them. Anything that's often is 3 points, so 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21. Sometimes it'll be 2 points, so I've got 6, 4, and 2, and then 1 point here. And then total amount. idea behind this exercise, everyone, so that you can see where you fall. If I look at my totals here, I know that I'm pretty even with visual and kinesthetic. But I'm fairly weak with auditory. And for me, I'm not surprised. I know I'm a visual learner. My teachers would ask me who led what battle in such and such a year at such and such a place, and I would look at my teacher and say, I don't know. She'd say, Heather, didn't you do your homework? Yes, ma'am, I did. I read it. She says, well, then you would know. No, ma'am, I don't. And she'd say, well, then you didn't do your homework. You didn't do the reading. I'd say, yes, ma'am, I did. But if you will look on page 124 in the bottom right-hand corner, the answer's there. I just can't tell you the name of that general. And she said, Heather, don't try and pull one over on me. No, ma'am, Miss Anderson, I promise. If you will check at the bottom of page 124, right-hand corner, that's where the answer is. I just don't know who it is. And sure enough, I could tell her where to find the answer, but I couldn't tell her what the answer was. So I know I'm a visual learner, but and I know I'm not an auditory learner. My attention goes too many different places. So if somebody were tutoring me, don't plop me down in a straight lecture, because that's not going to help me. If you've got to put me in a lecture, then give me something to look at that I can follow that lecture with. And I can guarantee you, when you look, my notes are going to be all full of diagrams and pictures, and they'll be multicolored, and they'll be prolific, because I am very kinesthetic too.
There is something, and I don't know the exact part, but they say you learn 10% of what you hear and 30% of what you see.
Mm-hmm.
But when you write it down, it's 70%. When you hear it and you see it and you write it down, you retain 70%. Have you seen that before?
I haven't, but that makes sense, because if you do all three, then you are putting information in every possible method. And you're reinforcing, you're hitting the strongest one plus reinforcing with the other two. Is anybody surprised about what they found out about themselves? Kind of?
I color code everything. I work at a pain clinic as a receptionist, so I color code things and stuff
Right.
like that. But I got like 17 on audio, visual. I got 20 in kinetic. I got 15. So.
Yeah, but that makes sense. If
Yeah.
you use a lot of colors, you're more visual.
I didn't realize I was as kinesthetic as I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tied on my visual and kinesthetic, and my auditory is the lowest, which I know that.
Mm-hmm.
I've always known I'm not. Anytime I go anywhere, I'm like, do you have a printout of the PowerPoint? I can't follow that.
So, if you know this, now when you go into a learning situation, maybe you can help structure things for yourself that will better enhance the way you learn. Hi, welcome.
Just you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're going to take about a 5-minute break, real quick. Get up and stretch. If you need to use the restroom.
He's all over the place.
I'm all over it. Okay, everybody, would you pull the menu out? That should be the next packet in that same side. Take a moment. I want you to go ahead and choose your lunch.
I looked ahead.
Who in here can actually read Russian?
Phonetic alphabet.
I want you to choose one from each category. We're not able to get tomato soup. We're not able to have hamburgers today.
Well, darn.
Be interesting to know what you're reading then, wouldn't it? If you don't read that language.
Well, I see tomato
Yeah.
and I see
It really
chicken
is.
Oh, yeah.
and hamburger.
Come on, just one from each one.
So, I'll just go
I'm just
eat it
gonna
in my
adjust my
mouth.
Let's see, this is gonna take a
And
while.
I will eat anything in there. I'm very good at it.
Google Translate.
That's TV.
Why didn't you translate? That's English.
Right.
Yeah. I won't do that.
Well, it wouldn't help me anyway. I never learned.
Okay, so I can tally this up real quick.
Oh, this is
How many want number one on the appetizers? Really?
It didn't look really good.
Nobody? How many
Or
want
sound
number
really
two?
good.
Number two is what I choose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
And that's because it looked pretty.
Number 3. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 4. 1. That's a good Greek dish. Number 5. 1, 2, 3. Okay, good high protein. On the soups, who wants number 1? Only one? You're choosing like me. Good job. Number 2, good French soup. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Number 3. 7. Okay. The entrees include salad, rice or potato, and a vegetable. Number 1. 1. Okay. Number 2.
Oh, I had one, sorry.
Oh, okay, 2, 2. Number 3, good Asian dish. 3, 4. Number 4. All right. 2. Number 5, good English fare. 1, 2, 3. We don't have any 6. Number 7. 1, 2. Okay. All right.
That's what these are. That's so sad.
So how did it feel to look at that menu?
Well, once I realized what alphabet it was, I wanted to hit myself.
Feel like going somewhere else, Steve.
Yeah, where they have hamburgers.
I was just gonna ask what the special of the day was.
That's one way to get around it.
Oh,
Chef's
yeah.
recommendation.
3 years ago, our state conference, we had an attorney come down and speak to us. He came from Chicago, and he had just written a book called Hamburgers and Hot Dogs. He comes down and he tells us his story. His 9-year-old son was in 2nd grade, and the teachers had called he and his wife in for a meeting and said, we're gonna hold your son back again. This would have been the 3rd time this little boy had been held back in school. And they said, you can't do that. And she says, well, we have to because he's not reading. And they had spent money with Sylvan and all these other tutoring places to try and get him the help he needed to learn to read. And nothing was working. They had spent countless hours with their child trying to help this little boy learn to read. And John was so frustrated. He said, he said, I knew I had to do something when one night I find myself in my closet with the door shut and the light off. I was sitting on the floor weeping my eyes out. He says, here I am. I'm a high-powered attorney, and I solve complex problems for people every single day, but I can't solve this one problem for a little 9-year-old boy. I can't even find the resources that he needs. And so he pulled himself together and he goes into downtown Chicago and he finds the Maine Literacy Council down there. And he walked in and somehow got in to see the director. And he says, I need help. And she says, okay, what can I help you with? He says, I want to learn to do what you do. She says, what do you mean what we do? Well, you teach people how to read. I need to know how to teach people to read. I need to learn. I've got to help my son. And he tells her the story. He says, can you help me? And she thinks for a moment. She says, I think I can. She says, but I want something from you in return. Well, he yanks that checkbook out and he says, anything, what do you want? And she says, well, you can do that if you like, but what I want is for you to tutor another adult. I want you to go through our process and work with the student. And he says, okay, I'll do that. Whatever it takes, I need to be able to help my son. So he goes through 3 weekends of trainings and a couple of Wednesdays, and he finally gets to the point where he's with his student, and he sits down for an interview. Because usually the first time you meet your student, you get to know each other. And so, of course, his first question is, why are you here? And the guy looks at him. He's in his late 40s, big, strong guy. And he says, I want to learn to read. He says, no, I know that. He says, why are you here now? What is it that sparked your interest in coming now? Why not before now? He says, honestly, I'm tired of hamburgers and hot dogs. He says, my whole life, you know, from the time I was a kid, we'd go out to a restaurant, and I can't read that menu, and it's embarrassing. We'd go out after a softball game, I can't read the menu. But everywhere I've ever gone, they always have hamburgers and hot dogs. I have hamburgers and hot dogs for kids, so I know if I order that, I can get it. He says, but I want to be able to look and make a choice. I said, okay. So, yeah, it's frustrating. You know, these words are English words. This menu is written in English words. We use the Cyrillic alphabet because that's not familiar to most Americans. But the words are English words, they're not Russian words. So, y'all want to know what you ordered?
Yes, please.
All right, the appetizers. Number 1, anchovy eggs. It's a type of caviar. Number 2, pickled beets. Good choice.
Gross.
Yay for number 2. Number 3, shrimp cocktail. Number 4, stuffed grape leaves. Those are good. Number 5, high protein, lots of texture. Those are fried roaches.
Oh.
Not that bad, just saying. I had them in Korea.
The soups, number 1 is an oxtail soup. Number 2 is a garlic soup. Number 3 is a turtle soup. Just hope the turtle soup's good and bad, just depends on the chef. The entrees, number 1, chicken livers. Number 2 was lobster. Number 3 is a good Asian delicacy. Those are stewed eels. Number 4 is a fruit plate. Good time of year for that. Number 5 is a kidney pie. Those are good. Number 6 we didn't have, and number 7 is roast dog.
Oh my God.
All right.
It's not, that is not part of our culture, but it is part of other cultures. Just like the roaches. Not part of our culture, but there are cultures that don't think twice about it.
I didn't do that at all.
And this is why I said, just ask what the special is. I'm really not happy with what I got.
So, why do I do this exercise? Because I want you to just have a hint of how your students feel when they are presented with their language, the language they speak and communicate in all day, every day, but they can't recognize it when they look at it. in this vein of things. Who wants to read this for me? Who can read this story? It's in English. Come on, anybody?
It's not Dr. Seuss, is it?
Oh, no, ma'am. I'll tell you what, who can tell me how many sentences there are? 8. Why do you
8.
think there are 8 sentences?
We go by the
The
period.
periods.
8 periods, right. And in the English language, I told you, this is in English, okay? This isn't another language. In English, we end our sentences with periods and question marks and exclamation points. So, already you know there are 8 sentences. From which direction do we read?
Left to right.
Left to right.
And how do you know that?
Because the period's at the end of the sentence.
Right. If you know this stops a sentence, then you're gonna start over here, right? Okay. How many paragraphs are there?
2,
Good.
5,
What else can you tell me about what you're looking at?
The first word is the same.
Yeah, the first one's all.
Okay, so there's some, here, let me move this a little closer.
Yeah.
Right, so the first word is the same all the way down, okay?
The second word is the
Maybe
same in the
the.
first paragraph, and
The first word is the.
First, second,
I was
third,
thinking that
fourth.
too.
First,
First
second,
4
third,
words.
and fourth in the first paragraph are the same. There's a lot of repetition then.
Yeah.
In the English language, there are 10 words that make up 25% of the language we use. 10 words.
That make up what?
25% of the words we use. So A and B, for, have, in, of, that, the, and to.
And that
We
number
use those
3 could
words
be a
so
S. That number 3 could probably be a S. I'm just guessing.
Could be. Can you puzzle out any parts of speech?
Well,
Articles.
the second word is probably the subject in the sentences,
Why do you think that?
because that's the way English works. Probably the first word is the something.
Okay, so in English, we usually have a subject, which is a noun or a pronoun, as the first word in a sentence. And an article generally comes before that, so
Before the,
a and the, or this or that.
yeah.
Okay, can you puzzle out any other parts of speech?
The last word could be the subject.
Object, you mean?
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Like,
so maybe the last word is an object?
And maybe a prepositional phrase at the end.
Okay, so already you're, just with what you know about the language, looking at this gobbledygook, you can puzzle out a lot about what you see up there. So you know the English language, your students know it, they know how to put it together. So they're kind of in this boat. This is what they look at, and they know that they should understand it. At least that's how they feel. So, all right, let me take you through a few more steps.
quit the class.
I got it, thanks. I'm not used to having such a clean whiteboard to work on. The ones in the prison are quite abused. Okay. I'm gonna run you through and teach you how to read the story. Okay? This is a boy with round, chubby cheeks. Say boy.
Boy. Boy.
Good. This looks like a boy with round, chubby cheeks. Say boy.
Boy.
Here's the word boy. Read boy.
Boy.
Boy begins with the sound b. Say b.
Buh.
Again.
Buh.
Again.
Buh.
Again.
Buh.
The sound for this letter is b. The name of the letter is bet. Say bet. Again.
Bah.
Good. What sound does it make?
Buh.
What is this word?
Boy.
Boy.
Good. This is a ship with 3 tall masts. Say ship.
Ship.
This looks like a ship with 3 tall masts. Say ship.
Ship.
Here's the word ship. Read ship.
Ship.
Ship begins with the sound sh. Say sh. Again. 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 The sound for this letter is sh. The name of the letter is shet. Say shet.
Shet.
Again.
Shet.
What's the name of this letter?
Buh. Buh.
Bed. Good.
Bah.
The sound?
Buh.
Boy.
Boy.
Ship.
Ship.
Good. This is a ladder. Say ladder.
Ladder.
This looks like a ladder. Say ladder.
Ladder.
Here's the word ladder. Read ladder.
Ladder.
Ladder begins with the sound oo. Say oo.
Oo.
Again.
Oo.
Again.
Oo.
Again.
Oo.
The sound for this letter is oo. The name of the letter is L. Say L.
L.
Again.
L.
The name of this letter?
Ship.
The name of this letter?
Bah.
Good. The sound?
Buh.
Boy.
Boy.
Ship.
Ladder.
Good. This is the back of a chair. Say chair.
Chair.
This looks like the back of a chair. Say chair.
Chair.
Here's the word chair. Read chair.
Chair.
Chair begins with the sound ch. Say ch. Again. 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 The sound for this letter is ch. The name of the letter is chet. Say chet.
Chet.
Again.
Chet.
Good. The name of this letter?
L.
L.
Good.
Bah.
The sound?
Buh. Boy. Ship. Ladder. Chair.
Good. All right, the last line. This is, excuse me, this is a rope. Say rope.
Rope.
This looks like a rope. Say rope.
Rope.
This is the word rope. Read rope.
Rope.
Rope begins with the sound r. Say r.
R.
Again.
R.
Again.
R.
Again.
R.
The sound for this letter is r. The name of the letter is air. Say air.
Air.
Again.
Air.
The name of this letter?
Chet.
Chet. Good. The name of this letter?
L.
Good. The sound?
Buh.
Boy.
Ship.
Ladder. Chair.
Rope.
Okay. So what is this letter, or what is this word?
Boy.
What is this word?
Boy.
Good. This sentence says, this is a boy. Read the sentence.
This is a boy.
Good. What is this word?
Ship.
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 This is a ship.
Ladder.
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 This is a ladder.
Chair.
Chair. This is a chair.
Rope.
Rope. This is a rope.
Now, how was it that time? Was that a little better? You've got some references here. What kind of things made it easier?
The repetition.
Repetition,
The pictures.
the pictures.
Visual.
So my student, even as I ask my student what this word is, even if they don't remember, they've got this to refer to. If their pride won't let them look directly at it, their peripheral vision is still going to catch it and help them to make more connections in their head for those letters. Repeating, and we learned these 3 words. I never introduced them to you until I modeled that first sentence. So once you've got the key and you've done this story, do you think that you can do this one now?
This boy has a ship.
This boy
has
a
ship.
Ladder.
has
Boy
a
has chair.
ladder,
Rope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
has
Ship.
chair. New ladder.
Okay, now the second paragraph.
It just doesn't want to stay up here today.
Let it be this boy is on a ship.
Yes.
There he goes.
We're going to give up on this one. So how does that feel now? Now that you have a key, do you feel more confident in deciphering the other one? So the picture symbol relationship, that's key. So here I've got a picture, a boy with round chubby cheeks. And then I show superimposed how these two are related. I draw that B here, I draw it again when the B is superimposed over the picture. And then I introduce the word boy, and now we've got a 3-way link. Okay, this key word becomes really important. So your student will always remember that when he sees this letter, he thinks of the boy. Ah, boy, the key word, boy, but, that's the sound. That first sound in that word is b. So that gives him something concrete to hold on to. Even if he sees that letter somewhere else, he has all these things to link back to get him to that sound if he doesn't remember it immediately. Repetition over and over will help. In language acquisition, there is a principle known as moving from the known to the unknown. So here I have taught you this word already on the chart, and I start here, and I reacquaint you with this word. Then I move over, to this one. I move over here, and it looks different. It's surrounded by different letters. It doesn't look necessarily the same as it does up there. This is a little scarier. But by starting there and showing you this is the same, then this becomes less scary. Okay, I know that word, boy, good. Then I can introduce this. So I've started with what you know and moved to what you don't know. This program is designed to always move in that fashion. And it's always starting with what you know on the left, which is the direction we start when we read, and we move to the right, what you don't know, just like when we're reading. There are a lot of subtle things that we do in this curriculum that reinforce all the habits and skills that we need for reading. And if you look long enough, you'll start seeing patterns that emerge that reinforce everything. The the letter-sound relationship. So you've learned all of these. And who here does cryptograms? Anybody? Okay, cryptograms, have you ever seen in the newspaper when they take a whole bunch of letters and substitute them for maybe a quote? And you have to kind of figure out what's being said. That's kind of what we were doing here. And naturally, we may try and puzzle out some of this using the same skills you would use doing cryptograms. So we've got a bunch of, there's some basic elements to the Laubach way, the Laubach system of teaching somebody to read. We use familiar vocabulary. Was there a single word up there that you didn't know? They're all common words. Boy, ship, ladder, chair, rope. Has, a, is, on, a, this is a. All of those words we use in everyday language. It could come into anything that we say throughout the day, right? I'm not coming up with these big 27-letter long scientific words to teach you. Content meaningful to an adult? Well, it is, because these are common words that can come in and out of your conversation any day. We teach something new in every lesson. Remember I said we always have a chart and a story, and that begins our lesson. There's independence in learning. So as we started here, we came all the way across and then kind of did a review. And then all the way across, up, down, and down. By the third line, I'm coming across and I kind of let y'all go. And I didn't have to prompt as much. And there's a feeling of success when I kind of let go of the bicycle, so to speak, you know, when you're learning how to ride. And that's what you do with your student. And they feel good about doing it on their own. We teach reading and writing together. So after we teach a reading component, there will be a writing component. When we get into practicing the actual English portion of this, you'll see what I'm talking about. Who thinks they could teach a lesson like this? Is there anything difficult about it? I don't mean using the Cyrillic alphabet. Could you do it with English? With English letters? I mean, if that's the extent of the lesson, that's not difficult. Yes, ma'am.
I've been using the Laubach for about a year now.
Okay.
And a couple of odd things have kind of come up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping you could kind of address that. One thing is the language that you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not from this part of the country.
Okay.
And I have discovered that there are certain pronunciations that are Kansan.
Okay. We will get to that after lunch. Okay. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I do address that.
Okay, another quick, maybe you'll talk about that a little later too, but with the pictures,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people, they don't see the pictures the way they were intended to. I have one student who, the word is yell, and the picture is somebody yelling. And to this day, after a year of working with her, she sees the word yell and she says holler. She can't get it out of her head.
Okay.
Colloquial.
Well, let me think on that, and I may come up with an alternative for you to try. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Are we ready for lunch? Okay, why don't we, this is a good point for me to stop. Oh, no, wait, I've got a couple more questions. Then we'll go eat lunch, y'all. So, what would a beginning level student like about the lesson the way I just taught it?
It's easy.
Okay.
The repetitions.
The repetition. Practice makes perfect.
Picture word recognition.
The visual clues.
Yeah.
That's a big help. You know, when I teach ESL, when I'm teaching vocabulary, I use objects and I use pictures. I try my best not to use any translation. If I can associate it with a picture or with a visual, my students will remember it much better. So with these students too. Yes, sir?
Continuously breaking it down without making it sound condescending was
Sure.
definitely.
Small amounts of information. Giving it to you in little chunks makes it easier to process. The words are familiar. You're not having to worry about a vocabulary as well as recognizing it. You're not having to learn a new meaning. You're just having to learn how to see what you already know. And how about that success in reading independently? Okay. As a tutor, what was my role?
Model.
To guide. So I gave instructions. I told you when to say, when to read, when to do different things, didn't I? What else did I do?
Model what it's supposed to
That's
sound.
right. I modeled it. Another principle in language acquisition, reception precedes production. It has to come in here before it can come out here. It has to go in here before I can write it. What else?
You let them demonstrate what they had learned by just pointing to it and letting them say it on their own as well.
Gradually releasing.
Right, I
Yeah.
determined when the student needed help and when I could let you go on your own. Praise and support. As we got across here, good. Okay, we can move on. Next. All right. Okay, good. Good. Last line, great. We finished this chart. So, I acknowledge that you're getting the skill right. It's time to move on and learn the next step. Good job at the end of doing that whole thing. Remember not to overuse superlatives because then they lose their meaning. So we don't say outstanding, fantastic, wonderful. Don't use that so often. But good, all right, okay. Those three I use interchangeably for my students when I want to let them know that you've got it right. We can go on now. Who can tell me what principle of adult learning was displayed in this lesson? Remember those 5 that we went over on that page?
Visual?
Not a learning style. What
Oh, I'm
principle
sorry.
of adult learning?
Oh, apply what you've learned.
Yes. So here I teach you something, and then you immediately get to apply it over here in reading that story. So you're getting to practice it right away. Another principle that we didn't go over, but one that's equally important, I set up this lesson so that it's okay for you guys to kind of step out on a limb and to try something. You know that I don't give grades. I don't redline anything. You know that there's no retribution if you get it wrong. So it's okay. You're safe. You've got a safe environment where you can take risks in trying out your new skills. That's really important with your students. There will be no ridicule. Well, I let my students ridicule me, but I try not to do it the other way. Okay, on that note, let's eat. We are gonna kind of work through lunch, because I told y'all I'm trying to squish, because this is a tight deal. If you need to get up and excuse yourself for a moment, please do. We're all adults. I know we all have things. We have to answer a phone call or something.